All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new podcast, Talking to the Void. Today is August 6th, 2023, and I decided that today is the day to start my podcast. I've been thinking about this since May, earlier this year, and last night I just had this feeling that today would be the day to start my podcast, so here we are. Talking to the Void is really just going to be me sharing my opinions on books, movies, shows, etc. in a relatively unfiltered, unedited format. For today, I have a general outline that I'm going to follow so that I don't totally lose the sense of what I'm trying to say, but everything in between is unscripted. It's just me talking freely. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today, I want to start by talking about something I'm very passionate about, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, and to be clear, I'm not an expert media critic, I am not a professional, I am literally just sitting in my bedroom with like a $25 lapel microphone recording this. I just have thoughts and feelings that I want to share. So, this is just going to be me sharing my opinions on the MCU today. No idea how long this is going to run, but I guess we'll see. So, there have been so many entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by this point that I actually had to pull up a list of all of their films, and I'm not going to spend a long time on all of them. I'm just probably going to talk about the MCU as a whole more than I do individual movies, although there are definitely some honorable mentions that I will probably spend some more time talking about. So in case you didn't know, the MCU started May 2nd, 2008 with the release of the first Iron Man movie starring Robert Downey Jr., and at that point they didn't know exactly what the MCU was going to turn into, but now we have this freaking leviathan of a series of projects that just keeps going and growing. And then followed by that we have the Incredible Hulk. By the way, I haven't actually watched all of the parts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Marvel TV Universe that have been released. I'm just going to be sharing my opinions on the ones that I have seen. I did not actually watch the Incredible Hulk movie that came out in 2008. However, I believe I've watched everything else in the Infinity Saga, basically through Avengers Endgame. Like that, I've definitely watched all of those. Beyond that, it gets a little bit shaky as to whether or not I've watched it. So, that said, the MCU is divided up into 4 phases, and they're already looking at Phase 5, believe it or not. So, Phase 1 was kind of all of the origin stories. There was Iron Man, funny enough, then Iron Man 2 before we introduced Thor, then Captain America, and then all of the Avengers. That was Phase 1. And the Avengers, of course, is where the original 6, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Bruce Banner, team up and fight Loki, who is trying to take over the world, starting in New York City, because that's just a convenient location to start taking over the world, I guess. And then we have Phase 2. Phase 2 is post-Avengers, so basically the key difference, I'd say, is that now the Avengers have experience as a team. They've started to grow as characters, like they've started their journey as individual characters, for the most part. And, there's also now the realization that there are things out there in space, hence the line in the Avengers where Tony points up at the ceiling, but really more is trying to point upwards towards space and says that's the end game. And, you know, of course, they had to call back to that with the title Avengers Endgame. But anyway, Phase 2 contains Iron Man 3, so sort of the final movie in the Iron Man trilogy. Not the end of Iron Man's character arc, though, but a definite stepping stone in it. Then we have Thor: The Dark World, the middle of Thor's arc. There's a lot of mixed opinions on that movie. I will come back to it in a moment. Then there's Captain America: The Winter Soldier, personal favorite of mine. Guardians of the Galaxy, which was new and different from, I would say, just about every other project up to this point. Kind of an Avengers vibe because it's a group rather than just an individual. But also their vibe is very different because they're the Guardians of the Galaxy and not the Avengers. Then they had the next big step in the MCU, Avengers Age of Ultron, so the second Avengers movie, seeing the characters reunite with all of the changes that they've now gone through in the previous movies, the new character development, all of that. I have thoughts on Age of Ultron as well. I would say Phase 2 is probably quite controversial among the phases. But anyway, that's Phase 2. Oh wait, there's actually one more. For whatever reason, Ant-Man is included in Phase 2. I actually don't know why that is, but that's the beginning of Ant-Man's arc, which begins in Phase 2. Then we get to Phase 3, which it starts with Captain America Civil War. Dang, starting out strong. I forgot that that was the beginning of Phase 3. I have thoughts on that one too. I have thoughts on many of these, but like I said, I will circle back to these once I've just talked through the general direction of the MCU. So after Captain America Civil War was the introduction of Doctor Strange, another very good movie. I quite like that one. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, so almost like the Guardians of the Galaxy equivalent of Age of Ultron, except better. Don't come for me. Spider-Man Homecoming, so the introduction of Spider-Man himself beyond his initial introduction in Civil War. We get the focus on the new MCU version of Spider-Man as opposed to the Tobey Maguire and oh my gosh, Andrew Garfield. There we go. Besides those two. Wow, I should not have taken me that long to think of those names. But anyway, after Spider-Man Homecoming is Thor Ragnarok. There's a lot of mixed opinions on that movie. My opinions on that movie are now mixed. I initially absolutely loved it, and now I have thoughts on it. I'll come back to that again. I'm going to be coming back to so many of these things. Then we have Black Panther, the introduction of the character, and sadly, because of Chadwick Boseman's passing, the only Black Panther movie with him in it. And then we have Avengers Infinity War, huge step in the MCU, honestly. Sort of the culmination of everything that had been set up in the previous two phases. And then after Infinity War, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp, which takes place sort of before and during Infinity War, if I understand correctly, and ending with the snap. Spoiler alert, by the way. Spoiler alert for literally everything in the MCU up to this point, in case, you didn't realize by now. Then we have Captain Marvel. Ooh, got some feelings on that one too. A lot of people do. Then finally we have Avengers Endgame, which is the massive culmination of everything set up in phases 1 through 3. And then for whatever reason, at least according to the Wikipedia, where I'm just scrolling through the list of movies so that I remember all of them, is Spider-Man Far From Home. And I can kind of see why it's phase 3, but it also really feels like it should be phase 4 instead. I'm going to keep going through the movies released thus far, and I am not going to dive into the movies that have not yet come out or the ones that I haven't seen yet. So, Phase 4 consisted of the Black Widow movie, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I have things to say about that one too, especially. Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Actually, though, hold up. The beginning of Phase 5 was Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which I did not realize, actually. I did not realize we were already in Phase 5. So, yeah, I'll get to why later, but I've kind of lost track of where we're at in the MCU because there's been so much going on, and also I have some thoughts about where the MCU is headed, but those are going to be probably my concluding thoughts later. Anyway, Phase 5 is also going to include, apparently, the Marvels coming out November of this year, Deadpool 3 next year. Are they thinking that that is going to be part of the MCU now? Because I have some concerns on Deadpool 3 being part of the MCU, considering the past two weren't part of it. But anyway, then we have Captain America Brave New World. Not loving the Brave New World reference. Have some thoughts on that as well. Thunderbolts, which I think is going to be, if I remember correctly from the comics, that is a sort of superhero anti-hero team created by Baron Zemo, so that should be interesting. And I think Yelena's gonna be part of that. I think that the guy who tried to be the new Captain America in Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think he's gonna be part of that too. And then there is Blade, which I know basically zero about. So we're going to stop there, and oh wow, they've started planning Phase 6 already. We're not going to get there just yet. Instead, we're going to focus on the things that I can talk about. So, circling all the way back to Phase 1, The Avengers has a soft spot in my heart because it's one of the first movies that I watched. Funny enough, I didn't actually watch the Iron Man movies until after I'd seen Endgame, I think. It's quite weird. I did not watch these in order. I'm actually trying to remember. I was trying to think about it last night when I was planning out this podcast. I don't remember where I started in the MCU. I think I may have started with the first Thor movie and just kind of popcorned around from there. The MCU didn't make a lot of sense to me at first because I watched it out of order for whatever reason that I can't remember, but here we are. So the Avengers has a soft spot in my heart because it's the first Avengers movie. The first Thor movie was decent. I would say it's an overall good introduction story. I don't know that I have any specific criticism for it. Love the Iron Man movies. Those were really well done. Literally every movie ever has plot holes and things wrong with it and things that could have been done better. But again, this is just my opinion, not necessarily a critical, objective analysis, but here we are. So Iron Man movies, love those. First Thor movie, decent. Again, no specific criticism there. Just not my favorite in the Thor movie, the Thor movies, all 4 of them. I think that as far as origin stories go, Captain America: The First Avenger is my favorite. I just felt like it was really well done, and Captain America's a good character. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on Phase 1. Phase 1 is pretty non-controversial, I'd say, although there's the very contested, I forgot about this, the very contested Incredible Hulk movie, which, like I said, I didn't watch, and it's interesting that it's listed in here because, in case you didn't know, the Incredible Hulk movie is the only Hulk movie in the MCU to this point. Only Hulk entry unless you count She-Hulk, but I have issues with that, and we'll get to that in a moment. The Incredible Hulk movie was with a different actor, so not Mark Ruffalo, who later came in as Bruce Banner in the Avengers. But yeah. So there's the Incredible Hulk movie. Didn't watch it, don't have any desire to watch it really, because it doesn't exactly fit into the larger narrative of the MCU all that well. They did bring some of it back in She-Hulk, but like I said, I'll get to that show later. So Phase 1, largely, pretty good. No major grievances that really anybody that I know of has with it, unless they just really don't like the MCU, in which case they may need to reevaluate some of their life choices. But again, that is my opinion. Phase 2, Iron Man 3, great. Love that movie. Thor: The Dark World. Boy, do I have thoughts on this one. It was not the best written movie I have ever seen. It's not the best executed movie that I've ever seen. However, I would say the one... Oh, I'm also mad that Frigga died. Yeah, spoiler alert. I have to say the one thing that I did really like about this movie is Loki's character development, because all we saw of him is essentially being the conniving younger brother with daddy issues in the first Thor movie in Phase 1. But here we get to see a little bit more beyond the surface, also beyond the villainous exterior we saw in the Avengers, and we finally get to understand his character a little bit more, and it also contains one of my favorite Loki quotes, which is, "Trust my rage," which he says when Thor says that he's not sure if he can trust him. So that was really good. The villain is probably my main sticking point with this one, my main frustration with it. Good villains are important to a superhero story, because if you don't have a good villain, if they're not a credible threat, that kind of thing, you just don't care about the story as much. Good characters, yes, you need good writing. Sometimes you can have amazing characters and terrible writing and it sucks. Sometimes you can have amazing characters and terrible writing and it works. It's a big mix of things to make a thing work. But, I have thoughts on the villain. I don't love the villain because that villain was very 2D. It's just kind of the I want to take over the world thing. I want to remake the world in the way that I want it to be. And it's just not a compelling story. And you can also tell that Christopher Eccleston, who played the villain, fun fact, also played the Ninth Doctor in Doctor Who, you can tell that he was not thriving in that role. So It looked like a bad time for all of the villains involved, both writing-wise, motivation-wise. Christopher Eccleston didn't enjoy it. So I would say that the main issue with Thor the Dark World for me personally, aside from just overall weakness of story, is the fact that the villain is just really, cardboard cutout, 2D, not interesting or compelling in any way. That's my main issue. Then we get to one of my favorite movies, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Holy crap, I love this movie. So I think part of the reason why it's so good is because the villain, the antagonist, I should say, turns out to be, spoiler alert, Bucky Barnes, Steve's friend who was captured and brainwashed by Hydra. The fight scenes are absolutely delightful in it. Honestly, that's probably why it's one of my favorite movies, is because of that. But then also the story itself of, once Steve finds out that the main antagonist that they've been facing, the Winter Soldier, is in fact his friend Bucky, it takes on a new emotional level because he wants to get Bucky back. He wants to bring his friend back. He wants to save his friend. And that's a compelling story, saving somebody's friend, So I really liked it for that reason. So overall story and fight scenes are great. Also, we got the introduction to Falcon, who is a lovely character. We get to see more of Bucky, who is one of my favorites. I would say Loki and Bucky are up there among my favorites. Yeah, overall good movie. Not too much else to say on that. There's a little bit of exposition dumping that I think could have been handled better, but honestly, it's quite forgivable, in the context of the rest of the story. So that one was really good. Now we get to the Guardians of the Galaxy. So as I said previously, the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of have Avengers vibes, but, because it's a group rather than an individual, but they all work cohesively in a very chaotic manner. I would say that I don't have any major criticisms or major, I loved this from it. I enjoyed the movie. It was a good movie. I'm very partial to their music decisions, their music choices. Really like that. Somebody pointed this out, and I wish I could cite the person exactly. I saw this on a YouTube channel, and if I can find it, then I will cite it. But basically, this person was saying that the soundtrack in this movie functions as another character, and I really like that interpretation. I just think that's neat. I really like the music choice. That's kind of all I have to say on that first movie. I could go into way more depth on literally all of these, but I'm going to stick with some basic opinions on the ones that I think are more important. Avengers Age of Ultron, people have a lot of feelings about this one. I think that one of the main criticisms is that they introduced Quicksilver solely for the purpose of killing him and providing motivation for Wanda to join the fight. That was definitely a waste of a character, and I don't love that. Somebody also pointed out, I think this is actually in a video by Overly Sarcastic Productions, or OSP, I think it was Red, pointed out that they were pointing towards killing off Hawkeye in that movie. All of the signs were there that, oh, you should start caring about this character because this character might not be around for much longer. And then they kind of flip the tables on you and kill off Quicksilver instead when it really looks like it's going to be Hawkeye. And honestly, I'm glad that they didn't kill Hawkeye because the Hawkeye show was nice. Again, thoughts on that later. But it was okay. There were definitely the fun points in the movie that made it feel like a proper Avengers movie. There was the really neat 360 shot, again, kind of echoing the first Avengers movie, because let me explain. There's a shot in the first Avengers movie where they're all preparing to fight. There's the 6 of them in a circle, and the camera does this really epic 360 around them. They did that again in Avengers Age of Ultron, and I like that callback because A, it's just a really cool shot, and B, I feel like it just kind of makes it a proper Avengers movie at that point. So, yeah, the writing could have been better. They could have done better with Quicksilver and actually used him more in the film itself and also in the MCU, but, c'est la vie. That's really just my basic thoughts on that. Also, Ultron's an interesting villain. I feel like he needed more, if you will. Like, there should have been more exploration of, why he was the way that he was, why he became sentient like this, that kind of thing. I mean, like, yes, it's explained, but I don't know. I feel like there's something lacking and I'm not quite able to pinpoint it right now. But anyway, those are kind of my basic thoughts on Avengers Age of Ultron. I should really go back through all these movies and make proper notes on them, but that's a problem for another time. Then we get to Ant-Man. Delightful movie. Enjoyed it. Creative, innovative. Honestly, I think the last time that I actually went through and rewatched all of the MCU movies, this was one of, if not my top favorite movie, because the vibe is so different. It's so goofy and lighthearted, but also, is a proper superhero movie. And I just like their different take on things. It was fun. It was good. So that's all of Phase 2. And then we get to Phase 3, starting it off with Captain America Civil War. That was a really good movie. I'm personally Team Captain America. Be curious to know other people's opinions on that, but I agree with his philosophy more. He's sticking to his guns. He's doing what he believes is right, and honestly, how can you disagree with somebody doing what they believe is right and, having the reasoning to back it up as well is the key. I understand both sides of the argument, and rewatching it, I'm like, I really do understand both sides. But it was quite good. However, the kind of switch towards the end where it's more just, whatever. Basically, there's a shift in the thing driving the plot, the reason why they're fighting. Not bad, but it kind of takes away from the overall struggle, the main conflict that the movie started out with. So, Captain America Civil War, very good. Honestly, some phenomenal acting in that movie, if I might say so. Overall really good. Introduction of Zemo as a character, and I like the fact that he is in some ways a sympathetic villain because you understand his reasoning for hating the Avengers, and it is, I would say, quite a valid reason, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of things that he's leaving out of his, understanding or analysis of the Avengers, but you understand where this man is coming from, and that makes him a, what's the word I'm looking for? I was gonna say a sympathetic villain again, but there's another word for it. I think it starts with the C. I might think of it later. You get him. Anyway, that's all I have to say there. Then we get to Doctor Strange. Very good movie. Yay, Benedict Cumberbatch is now in the MCU. Overall, a really good movie because it's not until the very end of the movie that the character growth for the main character actually happens. He is consistently a jerk throughout the movie and, is self-centered and selfish almost the whole way through until I'm taking some of this from a video by Overly Sarcastic Productions. I believe it's called Doctor Strange is Really Great Because He Sucks. It's a really good video. Highly recommend that you go watch it. But really, he kind of sucks throughout most of the movie because he is so self-centered and such a jerk for most of the movie. But it's when he fails, because it's his fear of failure that drives him and makes him this self-centered jerk. But it's when he fails, it's when he loses the Ancient One, when she dies on the operating table, that the change happens. He realizes that it's not about him, and there is this quote that I think it's in that epic balcony scene where the Ancient One and Doctor Strange are astral projecting, and they're on the balcony together watching the snow and the lightning and everything as the Ancient One is dying. And she says, it's not about you, and that is it's that scene that's the turning point in the movie, and it's a very visually interesting and stunning movie, and I quite like it. I also love the fact that Doctor Strange essentially wins by, making the villain rage quit. So, yeah, I mean, the villain is, again, a little bit 2D in this, but I feel like the overall character arc and character development is compelling enough that the 2D villain doesn't matter as much. I would have liked some more explanation as to why Caecilius and his followers, disagreed, why they chose to go to the dark side, if you will. Like, yes, I understand Caecilius lost his family, but it would have been way more compelling if we knew what happened, sort of like with Baron Zemo, when you find out that his family died in Sokovia in the events of Age of Ultron. But anyway, thoughts on that movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Nebula is pretty cool. That is really my hot take on the movie. I don't have a whole lot else to say on that. Mantis is a fun addition to the team. Trying to think. Star-Lord's dad is a jerk. There's not really anything of substance for me to contribute to that one because it's not one of my top favorite movies that I have a lot to say about. So we're just gonna move right along to Spider-Man Homecoming. Good movie. I like this as an origin story for the MCU's Spider-Man. I like the fact that when we meet him, he already has his powers. I mean, technically we meet him in Captain America Civil War, and then we just get more of him, a focus specifically on him in Homecoming. But I like it that he starts with his powers, so we don't go through kind of what's become at this point the stereotypical drama of, holy crap, I have powers, what do I do with these? Instead, it's already, if you will, a well-adjusted Spider-Man just trying to function as a high schooler, and if that's not relatable, I don't know what is. It was a good movie. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say on that front. Alright, Thor Ragnarok, again, very contested movie, directed by Taika Waititi, a delightful human, honestly. And very creative. I have an appreciation for him. Anyway, so with that movie, definitely going in a different direction from the previous Thor movies. Some ways for the better, some ways for the worse. I think that they went a little overboard with the comedy in this one. I think they probably needed to rein that in a little bit more. However, I think that overall it wasn't a bad movie. I distinctly don't like Hela, but she's not a great villain, she's also not a terrible villain, she's just kind of mid. But anyway, I was thinking I was going to have more to say on this, but honestly it's really just that I think they took the comedy direction a little bit far in this one and lost some of the seriousness. And I mean, Taika Waititi is known for balancing gravitas with, lighthearted, random, humorous moments, but I think that they were leaning a little too heavily into the weirdness and the humor in this one. I think if they had backed off just a little, it probably would have kind of gone with the vibe of the previous two Thor movies, but also been an improvement on them. An interesting headcanon that I found, I think it was probably a Tumblr post, somebody was saying, what if the entire movie is just a comedic retelling by Thor when he's on the ship with all of the Asgardians? Just to entertain them on their voyage towards Earth before, of course, Thanos shows up and wrecks everything in Infinity War. But, anyway, I like that interpretation. I feel like that makes it make a lot more sense, but I feel like they did lose a little something in making Thor just kind of a comedic punching bag in Thor Ragnarok and later on in Endgame. So those are my thoughts on that. Black Panther, really good movie. Honestly, so the first time I watched it, I felt like it had been so hyped up that it just didn't quite live up to all the hype that I expected it to because I was hearing such glowing things about it. So I went in with over-the-top expectations, and for that reason, I was disappointed. However, long after the hype had died down and I decided to go back and revisit the movie a couple years later, because I didn't have all of that, hype in my ear and stuff constantly, I was able to rewatch it and I'm like, okay, I see why this is a really good movie now. Because when somebody just, is like, oh my gosh, best movie ever, and that's all you're hearing, sometimes you just get this inflated idea of what it's going to be or what it should be, And I think that's really what killed it for me the first time. But like I said, rewatching it, I was like, oh, I understand the nuance. I actually really appreciate this. I really like this movie. So it is now actually among my top favorite Marvel movies because it's overall really well done. I take issue with Killmonger because I understand his motivations, absolutely, but it's a little complicated for me because he's like, yeah, and I killed my brothers and sisters to get here, and I'm like, are you not seeing the issue here? Like, his whole thing is he wants to share Wakandan technology with the rest of the world to help out people like him. But his way of going about it is kind of messed up to me, and he's like, yeah, I killed my brothers and sisters to get here, and it's just like, is that not defeating the purpose, sir? So that's kind of my main issue with him, but otherwise it was a good movie. That's my one complaint, though. And then we come to the infamous Infinity War. Yeah, because Loki was one of my favorite characters, I was really mad that he died in, like, the first 5 minutes of the movie. Like, I don't think he made it 5 minutes into the film, and I'm like, that was a waste of Tom Hiddleston's time. He deserved better. So, I was frustrated about that, but, I'm not in charge of things, so oh hecking well, I guess. So I was mad about that. They really did spend a lot of time in the movie focusing on Thor building an axe in space, which, like, yes, was cool, but also, sorry, what? Why? Like, this weapon is pretty dang cool. He needs a new weapon, right? But, I don't know, I felt like that was kind of weird and unnecessary, taking all that time. I did like the little exchange between him and the Guardians of the Galaxy. That was quite fun. And then we got a little bit more of that in Thor: Love and Thunder, but yeah. So it was okay. It was okay. That's kind of what I have to say on that bit of it anyway. The fight in Wakanda was pretty epic. To be fair, I actually watched Avengers: Infinity War long after I had watched Civil War, and I actually didn't remember a whole lot of Civil War for whatever reason. I don't know. That one didn't leave an impact on me, but it's probably because I watched it without the context of the previous movie, so it was just kind of like, okay, people are fighting, I don't get it. But going back and rewatching Infinity War again after knowing all of the context that went into, like, all of these characters, all of their relationships, everything like that, then I have much more of an appreciation for it. Thanos irritates me because there's literally the whole thing of why not double the resources? And I guess a friend told me that in the original comics, the reason why he wanted to kill half the people rather than just double the resources, which is kind of the more reasonable solution if you ask me, not the homicidal one, or genocidal rather. The actual reason for that in the comics was because he was in love with, I think her name was Lady Death, or maybe it was just a female personification of death. He was in love with her and wanted to impress her, hence wanting to kill half the universe. And that makes it make sense. But that was absent from Infinity War, and I feel like that actually would have made the story more compelling and possibly made Thanos more of a sympathetic villain than he actually is, because, you get his backstory, you see the suffering that he's witnessed and understand his reasoning in wanting to fix things, but the particular decision to kill half the people just doesn't make sense. If he had cited something like, well, I can't double the size of a planet without, utterly ruining the natural order of things and ruining how years and months and days work, or something like that would have made sense. Like, that would have worked. That would have made sense. But, as far as just doubling resources goes, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just be like, nah, I'm gonna kill half the people, So I think that it actually would have been more compelling if they had just thrown in a little something where, because of the suffering that Thanos has witnessed, if they had talked about how Thanos was rejected as a child and things like that, and how he was just desperate for love, they could have introduced Lady Death, and then he could have, wanted so desperately to be loved by somebody that he wanted to impress her, to make her fall in love with him by killing half the people. I think that would have been much more compelling. I don't know. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that, honestly, because I have a lot of issues with the fact that he basically went, you know what, genocide is the answer. So I will stop ranting about that now. Overall, a good movie, just kind of tragic ending, truly. And I'm just pissed that he died before the snap, because that means he doesn't get to come back. And I will talk about that more later when we get to the Loki show. But anyway, next entry in the MCU is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Another good movie, really, no complaints or necessarily specific praise from me. My favorite character in that movie is probably Ant-Man's friend. I think his name is Luis. He's freaking funny. I love the flashbacks where the characters are basically mouthing exactly what he's saying. That might have been my favorite part of literally the whole movie. But yeah, it was a good movie. The antagonist was interesting, but honestly, in my opinion, quite forgettable. I honestly forgot that she existed for a long time until literally right now as I'm talking about it, went, oh yeah, that was who the antagonist was. So, as you do. Again, not really any specific praise or criticism beyond that, so I'm just going to move on to Captain Marvel. So, I think it's not really a surprise or a secret that Captain Marvel is a very controversial movie. I don't think that should come as a surprise or a shock to anyone, because that is literally all I hear, is that it is a love-hate movie, and there's kind of nobody in the middle of the argument going, okay, well, I mean, it's not great, but it's also not horrible. I feel like it's quite a polarizing movie, honestly. So this is actually one of the movies that I saw in theaters. I don't think we saw it the day it came out. I think we saw it, maybe a few days after? I don't know. We watched it not too terribly long after it came out, and it had the potential to be a really good origin story. It really did. It had all of the elements there. It was just lacking in execution. So this is sort of, in my opinion, the main conflict of the movie. Yes, you have the conflict with the Skrulls and the fact that they're misunderstood, and, they're not all evil, crazy people, that kind of thing. But I would argue that the bigger conflict is with Carol Danvers and her emotions. And also, amnesia and remembering who she is and how she got there. But even more than that is emotions, because the first fight scene between Carol Danvers and the character played by Jude Law, I don't remember his character name, which tells you how much I care about that villain. Jude Law is great, character was not. But anyway, in their fight, we see that Carol Danvers has this thing on her neck that limits her powers, and the whole message that I got out of that fight is her teacher is trying to train her to control her emotions because they tend to overpower her, they tend to get the best of her. Then I feel like that kind of falls to the wayside for the literal rest of the movie until we get to the final fight scene. Also, Carol Danvers, because she doesn't display a whole lot of emotion throughout the movie, honestly. And, even when she meets up with her old friend, not Monica Rambeau, her mom, whose name Maria? I think it's Maria Rambeau. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but, also tells you how much I, cared about that character. That's part of the problem. I didn't really care about the characters in the movie all that much, even though I wanted to. Literally, the only character I truly cared about was Nick Fury, but also Monica Rambeau, I guess, because she's a kid, and Nick Fury, is a character that we know from previous Marvel projects. But, yeah, I didn't really care about the characters, and Carol Danvers, for supposedly not being able to control her emotions all that well, she doesn't actually display a whole lot of emotion through the movie, and then when we get to the final fight scene, it's this very bizarre and unearned and nonsensical reversal where she confronts her old teacher, who is really the bad guy this whole time, not a surprise, And he is egging her on, and he's all emotional and stuff, and she's just really cool and level-headed, and it just didn't feel earned or make sense. I feel like what would have made more sense is something kind of like, forgive me for mentioning this, the X-Men movie Dark Phoenix, where Jean Grey says something like, my emotions are what make me strong. And now that movie has its issues, and I'm not gonna get into all of that right now, but I feel like something along those lines, like saying that line or expressing it in that way, would have actually made the story make a lot more sense. It would have been great if we had seen Carol struggling with these intense emotions throughout the movie, and then at the end, controlling them, but also showing that her emotions are her power. She derives strength from them. Like, emotions are not what make you weak. They're what make us strong. They're what make us human, that kind of thing. I think that would have been a really compelling end to the story. Additionally, something interesting from the comics that I happen to know is that canonically, in the comics, Carol Danvers struggles with alcoholism. And I feel like alcoholism in women isn't discussed a whole lot, honestly. And at that, not seriously, we make jokes about wine ants and stuff, and I'm, not gonna, or like vodka ants or whatever. I'm not gonna try to get too deep into this or too political by any means, but I think that it would have been interesting if that was another facet of Carol Danvers' struggle that could tie back into the emotions thing. Like, if she just really struggles to manage her emotions and turns to depressants, like drinks, to control them, and she has to overcome her alcoholism demons as well, and in sorting out her emotions, that would have been extraordinarily compelling. I mean, maybe for some reason or other, Marvel couldn't put that in the movie, maybe because, Marvel is a part of Disney now. They're like, no alcoholism. Who knows? But I feel like it would have been incredibly powerful if that had been part of it, combined with the whole, my emotions are what make me strong, and learning to control your emotions but not suppress them altogether. I think that would have been really good, and I think that would have made Captain Marvel a really compelling character and also a really good introductory movie. Because as it is, there's the movie that's going to be coming out soonish called The Marvels. It's supposed to come out in November of this year, and I don't really care about it. I mean, I want to care about it, but I kind of don't. So anyway, enough about Captain Marvel. Let's move on to Avengers Endgame. Alright, so Avengers Endgame, I have my issues with it, but it holds a special place in my heart because I saw it the night before prom. That's literally basically the reason why I love it so much. I mean, yes, there's a lot of important cathartic moments, things that wrap it up. It's the end of an era, and I think overall they did a good job wrapping things up. I definitely have my issues with the movie, but I'll kind of go into those one by one. Honestly, it would be probably good if I rewatched the movie and then came up with specific points, but I'll just take you through whatever comes to mind as I think about it. So, first obvious problem, Loki is in it for all of 3 seconds, and the whole point of that was to set up the Loki show because unfortunately Loki died before people got dusted, so he's kind of not coming back, and I will, as I've said already, express my other frustrations with it when I get to talking about the Loki show. So yeah, that's my first complaint. I think that the traveling back in time thing was interesting. I think that trying to get the stones back from Thanos, like their original heist idea / plan / whatever, I think that was good, but I don't know, then they all just go their own separate ways for 5 years, everybody's depressed, it's just a bunch of depresso espresso. Yeah, I feel like they should have switched Thor and Hawkeye's storylines. That's probably a controversial opinion, but let me explain. Thor is not somebody who is easily defeated. Yes, he has been through some absolute crap the past, oh my gosh, is it just a matter of days? I'm trying to remember the exact timeline here, but he has been through a lot, and like the depression and stuff that he goes through in that movie, is understandable, but I also feel like because he's a warrior and a fighter by nature, he's more likely to go on a revenge spree, sort of like Hawkeye did. Again, Hawkeye going on a revenge spree also makes sense because Thanos snapped away his family and he is understandably very upset about that. So it's not that it doesn't make sense for Hawkeye, it's just I think it also would have made sense for Thor and maybe would have made more sense for Thor. I don't know. I just I don't know. I feel like Hawkeye losing his family and being depressed, and then Thor losing everything and getting angry and going on a revenge spree just fits their characters better. But, I also understand the choices made in the film. That's just my personal preference and how I would have written it. But, c'est la vie. Let's see, what else? Man, it's been a long time since I watched the movie, so now I'm just kind of replaying, like, the major parts in my head. The final battle was really epic. That was good. So much catharsis in that. My favorite scene, and probably literally everybody's favorite scene in that movie, was the portal scene when everybody comes back. I kid you not, the entire theater, when I was there, because I watched it the day it came out, just erupted in cheers, and it was a pretty neat experience, honestly, getting to be there in the theater with everybody seeing this masterpiece for the first time. So that was pretty cool. Portal scene, delightful. Still mad that Loki's not there. Happy that Bucky's back though, because he is also my child. But I did really like that. I liked everybody I think liked the I Am Iron Man bit. Iron Man's death, 100% tragic. Black Widow's death, also tragic. Everybody who died in that movie, except for Thanos and his people, was pretty tragic. I forgot Gamora died in Infinity War, not Endgame. Yes, that was tragic too. I get the two mixed up a little bit because they kind of just, they're meant to go together. They're part one and part two, essentially. Yeah, I don't think I've watched it recently enough to say a whole lot more on it because I'm just remembering like the really big moments. So we're gonna move on, and I might have to rewatch the movie and come back to it at another time because there really is a lot more to be said, but because it's been so long, I don't have a whole lot else to say right now. So we're gonna move on to the last thing in Phase 3, which for whatever reason they decided to end Phase 3 with Spider-Man Far From Home. Good movie overall. Goodness, I'm trying to remember that one now. It was kind of a fun coming-of-age vibe story. I like the fact that MJ figured out that Peter was Spider-Man. Interesting decision. I like the change from, the person finding out, oh my gosh, you're a superhero, to, no, I'm pretty sure you're a superhero. So that was a fun reversal. The villain was interesting, actually. Like, that was not a twist I saw coming. I was definitely suspicious of Mysterio, but I like the fact that he was just a slighted person who hated Tony Stark and was like, well, let me one-up you with my technology and also make Peter Parker's life horrible. So I did really like that. The illusions in that thing were absolutely mind-bending. Like, they did a really great job with the CGI for all of the different things, but also watching it was a trip too because you're not sure what's real anymore as you're watching it. So I quite liked it. I thought it was quite a good movie, and the ending was definitely something. I don't love the way they resolved it in Spider-Man No Way Home. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but overall I would say it was a pretty good, surprising movie. So those are my thoughts on, phases 1 through 3, the major phases of the MCU thus far. And then we get to phase 4. Here we go. All right. Just so you know, in case you weren't aware, there's various shows interspersed throughout this time as well. Like, the MCU shows, which started in, I think WandaVision was February 2021, so that's when the shows started. But I'm going to talk about movies first and go to the shows afterwards. So there was the Black Widow movie. I was really excited about it. I was really hoping it would be a nice send-off for the character, considering her death was really tragic in Endgame. But I did not love the Black Widow movie. It felt like they leaned too much into family comedy and not enough into epic spy Black Widow stuff. I felt like we didn't get enough epic but tragic backstory stuff on Black Widow. It just felt like weird family drama that didn't totally fit the vibe of what I think a Black Widow movie should be. I do really like the fact that it ended with her freeing the rest of the Black Widows, but some of the action stuff was kind of ridiculous, honestly. And it didn't totally feel earned just because the general vibe was weird family spy comedy situation rather than epic spy mission, edgy, whatever, because they set up the movie with the opening scenes to be this epic, kind of dark, edgy spy thriller thing, and then it turned into goofy, weird family comedy, and that's what made it disappointing because they set it up as something that I was really hoping for. I wanted this dark, edgy, different take on something in the MCU, especially because if you think about it, Black Widow's story is incredibly dark and tragic. But they didn't deliver. That was my main issue with the movie. Plot, not bad, but execution, problematic. Then we get to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It was really nice to finally have an Asian American superhero in the MCU, or just, at all. So it was nice to have that additional, that representation added to the MCU. I started rewatching it recently. I think my rewatch got interrupted and I didn't actually finish rewatching the thing in its entirety. I realized that it started setting up for She-Hulk and don't like that, but overall the movie was good. I really like their incorporation of, different Chinese mythology and stuff. It would have been neat to explore that a little bit more, but oh my gosh, the costume design, the visuals, the overall story was quite tragic again, but really, really well done. And I think I did actually cry during that movie. And for a long time anyway, I have not been the kind of person to cry during shows and movies, but that one really struck a chord with me. So serious kudos on that one. I really did enjoy that, and I particularly love Awkwafina's character, Katie. She is delightful. Those are my thoughts on that. Then we get to, guess what it is? Eternals. I think I watched Eternals when it finally came out on Disney+. I definitely did not go to theaters to see that one. So Eternals, the concept was interesting, but the execution was just really weird. It didn't feel like a Marvel movie. Oh, and that's actually something about the Black Widow movie. It didn't have the Marvel movie vibe. I don't know how else to explain it, but Marvel movies just have a very specific kind of upbeat superhero movie vibe. Some of them are much darker than others, but they still maintain that distinctly MCU feeling, but Black Widow and Eternals just kind of missed the boat on that, and that is also part of my disappointment with them. The Eternals were a fascinating concept, but I think I must have blocked most of it from my memory, because I'm remembering bits and pieces and not even knowing how to articulate my thoughts on this. I mean, the love triangle situation, you'll know what I mean if you've seen the movie, was kind of honestly pretty weird and didn't sit well with me. The one, oh no, I'm not remembering character names. I believe the actress is Gemma Chan. The character that she plays, Cersei, there we go, that's the character name. It's also spelled really weird and not the way I would expect. But Cersei's in love with that professor dude, played by the guy from Game of Thrones, which I haven't seen. I just happen to know that he was in that. That was really bizarre, and also then the ending scene where this guy has a sword, the guy from Game of Thrones who was in that movie, he has a sword or something, and then that was really weird, and to my knowledge there has been literally no payoff of that setup, and I have no clue where that was going, or if it was going, or if it is going to go. It was just really strange, and I didn't get it. I did, okay. One good point of the movie was LGBTQ plus representation. Thank you, Marvel, for finally putting something a little more concrete and substantial in it. Like, one of the main characters, one of the Eternals, is gay, and you see his life with his partner and his child, and I'm like, I think there should have been more, honestly. I think there should have been more discussion of it, more with the representation. But thank you for putting that specifically in there and for making it one of the main characters. That I appreciated. Oh yeah, Angelina Jolie was in that movie, wasn't she? I kind of totally forgot. Her character, Athena, was it? Like, Athena, but minus the A at the beginning. She just kind of didn't do a lot. I really wanted Angelina Jolie to be playing another seriously badass character, but that didn't really come to fruition because she kind of had memory issues, but like that could have been really well done, but I didn't find their execution of said concept particularly compelling, honestly. And then, the one guy just flew himself into the sun. Which, like, was kind of tragic, I guess, but also is funny because it reminds me of the Thomas Sanders Vine where he's like, and then I flew myself into the sun. So, yeah, my thoughts are all over the place on this one just because I only remember very small fragments of it. So that's kind of all I have to say on Eternals. Let's just go to Spider-Man No Way Home. So the main plot-ish with this, like, to start anyway, it ended up evolving into several other things, but the way it started was everybody knows Peter's identity because, the guy posing as Mysterio, the guy with the name Mysterio. I don't remember Jake Gyllenhaal's character. I don't remember what the character's actual name was. I'm just going to keep calling him Mysterio because I'm forgetting his actual name. Mysterio revealed Peter Parker's identity. I was really hoping that part of the plot would be he pretended to die, was not actually dead, just seriously injured, but did he return? No, he didn't. So that was a slight disappointment because I was thinking, that would be a plot twist because, in Spider-Man Far From Home, the whole thing is what even is reality anymore once you get into the really mind-bending stuff about, say, halfway through the movie? Anyway, when you get to the point where there's all the mind-bending stuff happening, you don't know what reality is anymore, I was like, is he actually truly dead? And I know Peter asks that question, but he could have just been acting dead, like, that wasn't specified. Anyway, I think it would have been cool if he came back and plot twist, he's not actually dead, and he's still gonna try to ruin Peter's life in other ways. That would have been interesting, but no, I'm pretty sure he's actually fully, properly dead. So, he did not come back, but there were the continuing repercussions of his revealing to everybody that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And so Peter's like, this is ruining my life. I need everybody to forget that I'm Spider-Man, and so he goes to Doctor Strange for help of all people. I mean, like, yes, it makes sense to go to Doctor Strange for help with that kind of thing, but also, Peter's just like, I know who can solve my problems. And he literally seeks out a wizard. So, then he decides to keep interrupting, screws up the spell, and then the walls of reality start crumbling. He manages to defeat Doctor Strange at one point using literal geometry, and it's just not feasible to me that literal geometry, that subject that almost everybody hated in school, that subject is what defeated Doctor Strange, a very powerful sorcerer. Does that make sense? I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. So I had issues with that, I think, quite understandably. So, yeah. It was kind of bizarre how Doctor Strange became an antagonist in the movie and then also disappeared for a lot of the movie before coming back to help at the end of it. It was just kind of bizarre and not quite the Doctor Strange content I was hoping for, but, I don't have control over the Marvel Universe, so that's what we got. I was sad about the ending because, Peter has to try to rebuild his relationships with, MJ and Ned, who just kind of don't remember him because of the thing that happened at the end. It was really nice getting to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in the movie as Spider-Man, like kind of bridging the Sony Disney/Marvel gap. I did like that. That was fun. And actually, I have to say, of the Spider-Mans in that movie, I mean, yes, we adore Tom Holland, but I felt like Andrew Garfield really stole the show, especially when he saves MJ and he is just overcome with emotion because, in a way, he kind of got a do-over of what went wrong in his movies and not being able to save his girlfriend. So that was a powerful moment. That was a really good moment. I really liked that. I liked the fact that he got that do-over. He got to save the girl, even if it's not his girl. And yeah, it was overall a good movie, just not necessarily what I was expecting or necessarily what I wanted, but, I'm interested to see where they go from here. Beyond those criticisms and praises, I don't have a whole lot else to say on that, so let's skedaddle on over to the one that I have a lot more to say about, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I first heard about this one in 2020, ? I think that was when I first heard about it. I think that might have been around when it was first being talked about and announced and stuff. And I heard that they were going to make it a horror movie. And, I was like, really? Horror? Really? That's where we're going with Doctor Strange? And, in the final product, there were quite a few horror elements that I have mixed feelings about it, because horror elements, when injected in a non-horror movie, really add to the atmosphere of it, if done correctly. And so I did like some of it, but jump scares are cheap, and I didn't like that. I did kind of like the whole unkillable monster thing. I just didn't love the fact that the antagonist was Wanda, because it felt like they undid all of her character growth from WandaVision. It felt like anything and everything that happened in WandaVision just got erased. And also, people who haven't seen WandaVision would probably struggle to appreciate or fully understand Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness because they don't have all that context. So that was definitely an issue for me. Also, Wanda just basically became evil out of nowhere. Yes, the Darkhold corrupts you, but... And then also her motivation was that she wanted to protect her boys in all universes or whatever, across the multiverse, basically. Yeah. Okay, this is really the main issue with it. Most people, filmmakers especially, struggle to grasp the concept of infinite. It is my understanding that the multiverse in Marvel is meant to be infinite. However, if it is truly infinite, that means that there are an infinite number of universes where Wanda is a mother. There are an infinite number of universes where she's not a mother. There are an infinite number of universes in which she just straight up doesn't exist. There's also infinite universes where she does exist. Infinite is incredibly hard for our tiny human brains to fully comprehend, and that's probably why filmmakers struggle with the idea so much. But her concern was that she, I don't know, if her boys got sick, she needed to be able to find a cure for them, and that's why she needed to be able to go throughout the multiverse. But if it's the multiverse, there are infinite diseases, yes, but also infinite cures. And so the argument really just kind of implodes. There's not an argument anymore if it truly is infinite. If it was a limited multiverse, if there weren't truly infinite universes in this multiverse, then it would be more compelling. Still definitely an issue because Wanda's villain arc kind of came out of nowhere given what happened in WandaVision. But it's particularly the fact that, in my understanding, the multiverse is meant to be infinite, and infinite in this case did not mean what infinite truly means. They failed to grasp the concept of infinite, and that's part of why Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness falls apart. Also, there's a fight scene where Doctor Strange and, like, evil Doctor Strange from another universe they fight with music notes, and, like, the idea is neat, I guess, but the way they go about it was just kind of bizarre and honestly laughable. And, I did like getting to see all the different versions of Doctor Strange. That was fun. It was interesting to see where his character could have gone had something gone differently, or the way it went differently in the other universe. That was interesting. But they don't get the concept of infinite. Also, with the concept of infinite, there's apparently only one version of, what's her name? America Chavez. That's her name, right? I'm 99% sure that's her name, America Chavez. Yeah, it's America, right? I'm 99% sure. Anyway, so, if the multiverse is truly infinite, there are actually infinite versions of her. There's also infinite universes where she doesn't exist, but it's just like, somehow, in this infinite universe, there's only one of her, but that's not how infinity works. So I would say that actually the biggest problem with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is the fact that they don't understand what the heck infinite even means. And that is why it really just kind of imploded on itself and wasn't very good, in my opinion. I got really excited when they brought back Peggy Carter as Captain Britain for that one alternate universe, and then she just kind of died really fast, and I was disappointed about that. I was also really disappointed about the fact that the entire Illuminati just kind of got one-shotted despite being apparently really powerful and supposedly really capable of things, and that did not show at all. Yes, was Wanda supposed to be the unstoppable horror movie monster? Yes, but I felt like I felt like the Illuminati just kind of got nerfed in that, and Wanda's victory wasn't deserved in that case, but I think that's enough ranting about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Let's rant about Thor: Love and Thunder instead. Okay, so Thor: Love and Thunder. Apologies if there's a difference in the sound or sound quality. I had to get up for a second and then just put my microphone back on, so it may sound a little different because I had to put it in a different spot this time. Anyway, Thor: Love and Thunder. I went into it thinking that this was going to be the last Thor movie, and that they were essentially setting up for Jane Foster to take over as Thor, and that she would then be a part of the Thunderbolts project, which is coming up. When exactly? Coming up supposedly December of next year. I thought that they were setting up for that because there's been other projects by this point that have been, in my opinion, pretty clearly setting up for Thunderbolts. But, excuse me, goodness. Allergies. Thanks a lot. I went into it thinking Jane Foster was going to take over, so then when it was revealed that she was dying of cancer, I was like, okay, well, that's probably not where this is heading, and I am preparing myself to be in tears by the end of the movie, which, fun fact, I definitely was. I was crying at the end of the movie. I think that they had a good sympathetic villain. I think that the villain's motivation was definitely compelling because, that one god really was a jerk to him and, refused to save his daughter even though he was a pious man. So that it was definitely a touching movie. The villain was definitely understandable. I think this is the mark of a good villain, of like a really truly good sympathetic villain. Not all villains have to be sympathetic to be good, but I think that there is definitely something to a good, proper, sympathetic villain, because when you have a proper sympathetic villain, or even when you just write a villain really well, you're gonna have feelings when that character dies. And a series of unfortunate events, not the Netflix series, not the movie that came out, but the book series itself, which I'll probably talk about in another one of my podcast episodes, is really fascinating because when the villain dies in the last book, you actually kind of have a lot of feelings about it, even though he was absolutely a despicable person. But there's definitely feelings there, and I think that that's kind of the mark of a good villain, is when they, especially when they've lasted a long time, or sometimes even when they haven't. Like, this was just a one movie villain because he died at the end. Spoiler alert, obviously. Um, but I was actually quite sad because his daughter came back, but then he himself was dying, and then he essentially passed on care of his child to Thor after Thor lost Jane to cancer. And it was just overall a sad but touching movie, and I do love the fact that the girl that Thor essentially adopted is actually Chris Hemsworth's real life daughter. I do love that. I'm a sucker for, family stuff like that. But okay, here's something. Here's some praise that I have of the movie. Aside from it was depressing, and I don't like depressing movies. Look, if I want to be depressed, I will literally just doom scroll through the news. That is all I need to be depressed. Look at the world news. The world is full of depressing crap, and if I want to be depressed, I'll look at that. I don't want my entertainment forms to also be depressing. There can be sad bits to it, but honestly, watching Thor Love and Thunder was just depressing because I'm like, Jane's gonna die at the end. Like, you kind of figure that out early on. So, like, even though you see it coming, it's still, like, it doesn't make it any less tragic. Same thing with, like, if you ever lost somebody close to you, unfortunately, my condolences to you. Even when you know it's coming, it's still really difficult to accept. It's going to be hard. Even if, this is a person that you have had, mixed interactions with. This might not be a person that you love, but simply because they're close to you, you're still going to have a lot of feelings when they pass, even if you've been preparing yourself for it. Like, anyway, tangent there. Let me get back to the actual point of this. My main praise for it is that it was very visually interesting. My favorite bit is the contrast of the color and then the black and white towards... Goodness, I'm trying to remember what it was, but basically I'm going to call it the quote-unquote final destination because I can't remember what it is, but basically leading up to the final battle, they are fighting in black and white for a while, and the contrast between that and the color later and the color before, like, it was very visually striking and interesting, and I did quite like that. Goodness, other thoughts on it. Gotta love Valkyrie. She's a queen. Or king, rather. She calls herself the King of Asgard, but you know what I mean. I like Valkyrie. She's a good character. I think those are my main thoughts on it. I found it depressing. I appreciate it, but that didn't make it any less depressing for me. So, not a favorite, but, not a favorite, but not terrible. So, those are my thoughts on it. It kind of continued, sort of. It kind of continued the vibe of Thor Ragnarok because it was also directed by Taika Waititi, but it took on a more serious tone this time because of Jane and the villain and his motivation. So, anyway, the next movie that came out after Thor Love and Thunder was Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which largely paid tribute to Chadwick Boseman and established Shuri as the new ruler of Wakanda. That is most of what I know about it because I have not actually watched the movie because, like I said, if I want to be depressed, I will look at the news. I don't want my entertainment to also be depressing. I have great respect for the fact that they paid tribute to Chadwick Boseman in the movie, but I don't need more depresso espresso in my life at this moment. So, I have not watched it. I have been told that it is a pretty good movie. I did actually spoil it for myself and look at like the Wikipedia summary of it. Like I looked at synopses of it. And there were some choices, like actual like writing choices storyline plot choices that they made that I am not a fan of, but because I haven't seen the whole movie, I'm not going to keep speaking to it at this point, so we're just going to go ahead and skip ahead into Phase 5, which I didn't even realize we were in already. I thought we were still in Phase 4, but we are not. We are now in Phase 5. Wow, does time fly. So, the only movie of Phase 5 that I have watched thus far is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Not a bad movie. I like the fact that they brought back characters from previous movies in different roles. That was neat. That was unexpected. That was fun. They also brought in the colossal jerk that is Kang the Conqueror. I really don't like him. I have lots of feelings about him. I also have issues with the actor because I haven't been keeping up with all of the news recently, but I at least know what he's been accused of, and you know what? Not a fan. Really not a fan. Not okay with that man. If he actually did those things, you know, that's not good. Like I said, I haven't looked into it, but it's not looking good. So, the overall movie was decent. Okay, possibly controversial opinion, possibly not. I'm really not sure on this one. I haven't watched a whole lot of other people's analyses of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But I don't like Scott Lang's daughter, Cassie. Not in this movie. Little Cassie was adorable and great in the first two Ant-Man movies, especially Ant-Man and the Wasp. Love that movie for little Cassie. Cute and adorable and amazing. Did not like her in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Goodness, how do I explain my dislike? I don't think that the acting for her was very good. And I try not to blame actors, because sometimes it has more to do with the directing than the acting, but then I look at how the other characters acted, like how the other actors played their characters, and then I look at Cassie again and I'm like, I'm not vibing with it. I don't love it. I feel like I could have played the character better, and that is why I then have an issue with it. Like, usually if I feel like I could have played a character better, I question the actor's performance. I feel like it could have been done better. I felt like it was... I'm trying to think of the exact words. It wasn't necessarily overacted. It felt pretty clearly to me like acting. It didn't feel genuine, you know? Like, when you watch all of the other characters in the movie, their emotions feel raw and genuine and like they're actual people feeling these emotions, not just people pretending to feel these emotions because, you know, they're actors. It just felt like the actress who was playing Cassie was acting. Anyway, who knows? Maybe she is a delightful, amazing, talented actress in other things, and it's not that her performance was absolute trash. I have seen far worse acting from, you know, other actors. It's just that it's kind of nitpicky because it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but I also didn't love the acting for her character. I also think that maybe there was some writing choices with her character that could have been better. That might have been it too, but I don't remember any specific instances of the writing where I can pinpoint it and be like, oh, this is why it was a problem. Here's another thought. I was definitely thinking that Ant-Man, so Scott Lang, and Hope would be stuck in the quantum realm together. I thought that was just how that was going to go. And that would actually have been really compelling and set up a potential fourth Ant-Man movie or, you know, future plot lines and things like that. And the quantum realm still has, you know, a lot to offer, a lot to explore, a lot to discover, truly. But they escaped. And I mean, like, yes, good for the characters. I'm not gonna complain about the victory for the characters. I just think that it would have been a strong choice. Sort of like in Infinity War with dusting some of the characters and being like, you know, that shocked the audience because, you know, the good guys usually win. That's generally how Marvel movies go, but they didn't in this case. And, you know, like, there is no clear or true winner in Civil War. Like, everybody loses in that one. But it was incredibly compelling because everybody lost. There was no perfect solution. There was no perfect answer. There was no perfect denouement. There was no perfect resolution to it. And that's part of what made it so compelling. And so I feel like they actually missed an opportunity in leaving Scott Lang and Hope together in the quantum realm. Like, that could have set up so many future plot lines. It would have given Cassie a major motivation, possibly, to stopping the other Kangs that we know exist in the other universes, thanks to the Loki show. You know, like, it could have done a lot. They could have done a lot with it. They didn't for whatever reason, and, you know, I'm happy for the characters that they didn't get stuck or that they didn't die, but I just think that that would have been a strong choice. I think it would have been an unexpected choice. I think it would have, you know, broken the mold a little bit more. It would have shaken things up in the MCU some more, reminding us that our characters, our delightful, lovely characters, are not immortal, they're not perfect, they're not always going to win. And I think that would have been really good. But I will stop my rant there as far as the movies are concerned. I'm probably going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 quite soon now that it's on Disney+. But I don't have anything to say on it currently because I haven't watched it yet. So, that is my entire rant on the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. However, we still have to talk about the shows, because I have a lot to say about the shows. So, actually, Marvel TV shows started, you know, a while ago. They started with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which apparently had 7 seasons. Dang, I didn't watch it. Agent Carter, which I actually watched the first season of it, and it was quite good. I meant to watch season 2, and for whatever reason, I don't know, I never got around to it. I have heard that Inhumans is not particularly good, but I know basically zero about that one. So I know basically nothing about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. except that it gradually turned into quite a mess, according to, you know, people who I've heard talking about it who have actually watched it. Agent Carter was quite good, and I actually just need to watch season 2. Excuse me. And then Inhumans, I know basically nothing about. There's also Daredevil, which I have considered watching and just have not gotten around to it yet. Jessica Jones sounds interesting, but I'd probably actually spoil the show for myself first before watching it. I do know that David Tennant is in it, and he is a phenomenal actor, and I quite like him, and it would be fun to see him as a villain in that show, but I do need to find out, you know, more about the show before I watch it. There's also Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, and The Punisher. I don't really have a huge interest in watching The Punisher. If I end up watching Jessica Jones, I might watch The Defenders, but thus far, I don't actually have a huge interest in any of the previous Marvel TV shows. There's also Runaways and Cloak and Dagger. No interest in either of them, to be completely honest. Hellstrom. I know absolutely nothing about that. I'm just going to skip that. By the way, I'm scrolling through the Wikipedia article right now because I need a list so that I remember all the shows I need to talk about, because honestly, if I were left to my own devices, I would probably forget. So, the first Disney Plus series for the MCU came out 2021. It came out in January. I was so weirdly convinced it was February of 2021. But January of 2021, first episode of WandaVision came out. And that was a really good show overall. I quite liked it. I like how it was a slow burn show that really took its time immersing us in this cute little TV world that Wanda essentially created for herself. But also getting all of these little hints that not everything is as it seems. I like how they build the mystery slowly, including, you know, showing us what's happening outside of the bubble, which I don't remember what they actually called that bubble that Wanda made for herself around Westview. But anyway, we get to see what's happening with all of the science-y people and Monica Rambeau and Darcy from the Thor movies. Like, we get to see all of them. And, you know, it was nice getting to see that. I like the way that they set up the show. The plot twist with Agatha was not totally a surprise to me, just because I got the sense that she wasn't all that she appeared to be. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I am not the biggest fan of how the conflict shifted from internal to semi-external in the last few episodes when Agatha reveals, oh, by the way, I am secretly a witch, you know? There's people complaining that WandaVision is bad because Wanda, you know, essentially enslaved people in her cute little fantasy that she was using to escape the reality of Vision's death. And to me, it was justified. Not that, you know, what she did was good or that it was okay. Not by any means was that okay, but it was understandable, at least, how she ended up in that situation. You know, like, it made sense why she enslaved Westview. You know, so what am I trying to say here, really? I guess what I'm trying to say is I like the fact that it was essentially Wanda struggling to cope with her grief. That was really compelling. That was a good story. But then Agatha came along and was like, well, actually, now it's about me, and now you have to fight me. And yeah, I also don't agree with the criticism of Wanda necessarily, because people are like, oh, she's such a terrible person. To my understanding, if I remember the show correctly, she didn't actually know that she had enslaved the people or that she was hurting them and stuff. She was just lost in her own fantasy. But then, you know, when she found out that these people were suffering and that she had enslaved them there, she let them go. It's not like she went, no, I'm going to go back to my happy little fantasy and you all have to live it with me. No, she let them go. She let them out of the bubble. So, did they call it the Hex? I think that's what it was. I think they called it the Hex, which would make sense because I think it looked like a bunch of hexagons stuck together. Anyway, she let the people go. So what she did wasn't right, but, you know, she wasn't deliberately evil, if that makes sense. And I think that's where I draw the line, is it wasn't deliberate evil, deliberate, haha, I will enslave you and make you live out my fantasies. It wasn't anything like that. So I don't fully understand that criticism of her. I don't think that criticism is fully justified. Anyway, their depictions of grief were quite interesting and definitely something to note. The overall show was very aesthetically pleasing and really well done. It was honestly a delight to watch just about the whole way through. However, how they got from the end of WandaVision to, you know, Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness, there's no logical transition in my mind to explain that. Yes, the Darkhold corrupts people, but again, Wanda's motivation for doing as she did in that movie was also not, that wasn't justified. It turned into a mess beyond it. So my main thoughts on WandaVision are, it was a really well done, slow burn show, setting everything up. It was really clever how they did all of the sitcom stuff and went through the different eras and, if you will, parodied different shows, different sitcoms from various decades. I love that. It was cute. It was fun. It was new. It was unexpected. I actually, going into WandaVision, had incredibly low expectations for the show, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised by it. And I think it was overall quite good. My main complaint, though, is that the struggle for Wanda changed from mostly internal, you know, dealing with your grief and stuff and trying to cope, to external, as in, oh, I have to fight Agatha to protect my family. Also, when is other version of Vision gonna come back? You know, like the white version of Vision that didn't go away? Wait, where is he? Where has he gone? What is he going to do? When is he going to come back? That's an unanswered question. Oh, and actually, funny enough, the main beef that I have with the show is in episode 2, towards the end, is it right after or just before it's revealed that Wanda's pregnant? I don't remember which one it is, but something interrupts their moment. They go outside, and there's the beekeeper guy standing outside the sewer, and then Wanda is like, I don't think so, reverses things, and then they have their happy ending. And I think it's then that it's revealed she's pregnant. But anyway, my issue is that, seriously, I kid you not, my main beef with it is, who was the bee guy? What happened to him? Where did he go? That is never answered, but it feels really important to me. Like, I want to know. Like, it's so silly. I developed this weird attachment to this random bee guy And I just want to know what happened to him. That is literally it. I just want to know what happened to my bee guy. That is my main beef with the show, along with the whole internal versus external conflict and how that all played out and how that led into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But anyway, that is largely my rant on WandaVision. And then next we have the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, let's see, I think I rewatched the show somewhat recently. I am not the biggest fan of the first episode as a setup. I don't have any particular criticism for it. I don't know exactly why I didn't like the first episode. I just didn't for whatever reason. The show overall was not bad, but for whatever reason, I just didn't vibe with the first episode. So aside from that, though, the show is overall pretty good. I did really enjoy the action sequences. Really not a fan of Walker, but I have to say that, my gosh, is his name Russell? Oh no, I'm not remembering the actor's name. Anyway, the actor did a great job making the character really freaking unlikable. Like, kudos for that. That is, I understand him, but I really distinctly don't like him. So, you know, I didn't like it. I didn't like him for that reason. I also was not a fan of the fact that, like, okay, so they did, in my opinion, a pretty good job discussing race and racism and things like that, and I won't dwell on that too much because I understand that that can get really contentious. But I think their overall discussion of it was quite good, and my main issue with it, though, is that Bucky was kind of pinned with all this guilt over racist things that other people did in the past. Like, he was kind of assuming the guilt for it, and I'm like, Bucky's not racist. He wasn't responsible for the racist things. There might be some things that he hasn't learned yet or doesn't fully understand or didn't fully understand, but I felt like the show kind of pinned all of, like, if you will, the white guilt on Bucky, and that didn't feel right to me, not just because I like him as a character, but also because it felt really undeserved. Like, Bucky's main struggle was overcoming his past as the Winter Soldier, and, like, that's also a big part of the show, and I'm like, let that be his deal. You know, don't pin all of the, you know, racist things that happened in the past that he had nothing to do with, don't pin it on him. Like, that bit bothered me a little bit because it didn't feel right. However, I do want to say that I appreciated the fact that, you know, Marvel really did go into the discussion of race because it's really important. These things need to be discussed, and I'm glad that Marvel went there and that they didn't just half do things. They were like, yeah, no, let's talk about these racist histories and make sure that people understand that these things happened. You know, yes, in a fictionalized Marvel setting, but still addressing real world problems. I can't talk apparently. So I appreciated that. You know what? My favorite part of the series was is it episode 4? There's a flashback episode with Bucky in Wakanda with his Dora Milaje friend Io, I think is her name, and she is reciting the Winter Soldier code words, and Bucky is resisting it, and then he manages to resist it and not become the Winter Soldier, and Io says, "You are free," and he just breaks down in tears, and holy crap, that was powerful. I really liked that. That was a really good, really powerful scene, and I really liked it. I think the other thing that I had beef with in the show was, let's see, the finale, and also the villains. Like, this seems like a problem that Marvel has, because where, you know, the overall idea that Carly Morgenthau and her followers had was to try to unite people, and essentially their cause was basically humanitarian, but then they also decided to be terrorists. And the issue there is, like, they have good cause, but they have to be considered evil, so I guess they're gonna kill people now. Like, I feel like it would have been more interesting and more compelling if there had been some wild misunderstanding, like, for example, they killed some people by accident, And then there's a confrontation between, Bucky and Sam and Carly and her people, and they realize that they all ultimately want to help people, and then it would be interesting if they found a sort of compromise and were able to work together to help this humanitarian cause. I think that that would have been good, but, the show went in the direction it did, and I just kind of want to go ahead and talk about Loki, so we're going to go ahead and talk about Loki now. I really, 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 really hoped that the show was going to be good. Some people are not going to like my opinion on this, and that is okay. I don't expect everybody to love my opinions. I don't care if you don't like my opinions. However, as long as you express your opinion nicely, politely, in a healthy manner, I'm happy to hear your opinion. I want to know why you like the show, why you disagree with me, those kinds of things. So, yeah, I had high hopes for the Loki show, and my hopes were dashed in the first 3 episodes. Yay! So, one of my main issues with Loki in the MCU is that they killed him in Infinity War. And then, because I'm trying to remember if I knew that they were going to make a Loki show, and I was really hoping that that was going to happen because they were going to find a way to bring back Loki, because he's died so many times before, but not really been dead or somehow come back. And I was really hoping they were going to pull another one of those on us, and he wasn't actually dead, because his character went through so much growth up to the point that he died in Infinity War, and I really wanted to see more of a not perfect, but largely reformed Loki in the rest of the MCU and in the show, but instead they took post-Avengers extremely selfish Loki and worked with him, and it's like they just completely wasted all of the amazing character development that happened throughout the movies, throughout Loki's character arc in the movies, and that really frustrated me. So that was a problem. Going into the show, I was like, okay, we're back with Avengers 2012 Loki. I'm not thrilled, but let's see where it goes. I think that they were trying to do a slow burn show, but if they wanted to do a proper slow burn show, they should have had more episodes or picked up the pace, because they only had 6 episodes, and I felt like they really dragged their feet through episodes 1 through 3. Episode 1, fine. That's an important setup. It's the literal first impression we are getting of the show. Take your time. Build the world. That makes sense, right? But then episode 2 still felt really slow. Episode 3 still felt really slow. I felt like we weren't really getting places, and also I felt like we weren't actually getting all that much information out of it. It felt kind of just like plot happening, and it felt like plot happening, but not plot advancing, if that makes sense. Like, things were happening, but they weren't doing a whole lot to advance the plot, develop characters. The first 3 episodes kind of felt like a waste to me. They felt kind of like a drag. I got more and more disappointed as each of the first 3 episodes went on. I just was quickly falling out of love with the show, and it was honestly quite sad and disappointing. Then we get to episode 4. I believe episode 4 is the one where Loki apparently dies at the end. He gets, I think the term that they use in the show is pruned, which basically just means that he's sent to an alternate universe, but you don't know that when it happens, and I was like, oh, okay. They just killed him again. Where is this going? This is about to get interesting. And so, I had hopes for that, and then episode 5 was interesting, and a lot of good things happened in episode 5, and then the finale was a big letdown because it was just kind of a huge exposition dump, and Sylvie didn't really think through her decisions, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the whole point of Loki, is he doesn't always think through his decisions, so female version of him is apparently not going to think through her decisions either. But yeah, also the whole relationship between Loki and Sylvie is weird because they're essentially alternate versions of the same person, and I don't want to get into all of that right now. I have incredibly mixed but largely negative feelings about that, but you know what? We'll see where it goes from here. My whole point in this is I was disappointed with the Loki show, but I saw the trailer for season 2, and I am sincerely, truly, deeply hoping that it's going to be better, because I would say actually the thing that killed the season most for me was the writing. I think if the writing had been different, because the show is filled with incredibly talented actors and actresses, and that's why I had high hopes for it. But I think the writing honestly killed it. It might have also been the directing. I think it's probably a combination of writing and directing. I'm not trying to throw shade or hate on anybody with any of my criticisms. These are just, honestly, my opinions. I think it could have been written better. I think I could have written a better show, and I'm not, trying to be bragging or boastful or anything. This is just genuinely my opinion. If I think I could have written a show better, if I think I could have made it more coherent, advanced the plot more, not just dragged my feet for the first 3 episodes, then I start to have an issue with the show. But anyway, that is my thoughts on the Loki show. Then there's another show that I have a lot of thoughts on, which is What If? What If sounded like an interesting show at first, and then basically every episode ever, a lot of characters that you love and care about die, and it's just depressing the whole way through, and I didn't like it because it was full of depresso espresso. The last episode, like the season finale, was interesting, and I like how they brought the characters together from the various episodes to deal with the final threat, but I don't like shows or movies or books that are just full of depresso espresso, which is why even though some people are like, holy crap, this book or show or movie or whatever is great, I won't read, watch it, whatever, because I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be sad. Like I said, I'll scroll through the news if I want to be sad. But What If was just depressing. Fascinating, definitely. It was interesting seeing our beloved characters in different situations, and it was interesting that it was an animated format. But holy crap, was it depressing. So I didn't like that show. Long story short, also, The Watcher was kind of bizarre. But anyway, moving on to the Hawkeye show, I was very happy about the disability representation, and like, it seemed to me anyway that they genuinely cared about it and really tried to make it an important point in the show. I like the fact that Hawkeye had to reckon with his past. Haley Steinfeld is delightful, who are we kidding? It wasn't the best show in the world, but it was enjoyable. It was fun. And it wasn't, like, as poorly made as I think some of the other Marvel projects have been. So, overall, not bad. And then we get to, can you believe it, my favorite Marvel show literally ever, Moon Knight. I could probably make a full rant on all of this. It is one of those delightful, mind-bending shows that you have to watch at least twice. You watch it the full way through the first time, you sit there, let it percolate for a while, really mull it over and go, holy crap, what in the world did I just watch? And then you go, let's do it again, let's watch it again. And it is a masterpiece of a show, writing-wise, visually. The villain in it is incredibly compelling because he doesn't believe that he's a villain. He fully believes in his cause. He sees himself as a good person, and that, along with some of the other things that I've said, that makes for an incredibly compelling villain. So I thought that was really, really good, and oh my gosh, I love it. Also, can we take a second to appreciate the Moon Knight and Mr. Knight suits? Like, those are pretty rad. I actually did a Mr. Knight cosplay because I really love the show so much and I wanted to be Mr. Knight. Oh, what a lad. All of the twists and turns throughout that show, keep in mind, this is another 6-episode series, but they didn't waste any time. Everything was advancing the plot while simultaneously building character. And the thing is, even though the plot was advancing rapidly, I would still in ways consider it a slow burn show in terms of character development and reveals and things like that, because it doesn't feel like a 6-episode show. It feels longer than that because of how much ground they managed to cover and how they managed to cover it so elegantly in such a relatively short period of time. Because think about it, the show itself amounts to about 6 hours because it's about an hour-long episode for each one. And in 6 hours, they managed to cover so much ground. It is truly astounding. And it's just such a good show. Honestly, I'm not talking about spoilers so much in this one, because if you haven't seen it yet, my gosh, you need to go watch it. It is so good. Anyway, I will probably, I'm actually really considering making another podcast where I just rant about Moon Knight and how delightful that show is. Anyway, moving on. I did actually watch all of Miss Marvel, didn't I? So I'm actually gonna pause for a second and pull up some notes that I have because I actually took notes when I watched this show. I was actually full on in critical analysis mode when I watched this one. Oh, I just realized I totally skipped all of my notes on Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I am just gonna leave those be, and I'm just gonna skip ahead to Miss Marvel. So, first things first, um, I really like that there is Muslim representation in it finally, because I feel like some positive representation for Muslims is severely lacking in the media. So I'm glad that like the Marvel universe is making strides in the representation direction. I also especially love that they showcase the fact that the religion Islam doesn't have to be oppressive and strict, and you can have strong Muslim women who are supported and have a voice. And I was like, thank you, because I think it's something that not everybody thinks about. Because, for example, you might see on the news all of the different things that are happening in the world and be like, that's kind of a not great religion because you just hear about all of the oppression and stuff. But it's like, no, 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 the religion is not at all the problem. It's how people are interpreting it and using it to try to, you know, support their views or their opinions or their power or something like that. Like, it's not the religion that's the problem, even though it might seem that way at first glance. It's not the religion at all. It's just how people are trying to twist it to, benefit themselves. So I really like the positive representation. Something that I also noted is I don't think I'm the target audience for this show, but I still have an appreciation for it because it felt kind of childish, which I think was the point with the main character, Kamala. Hence the YouTube channel and the pop art elements of the show. And I actually really liked the pop art elements of the show because it differentiated it. It made it unique because, the other projects didn't have this cute little quirk to it. However, I think it was after the first episode or first two episodes, the pop art elements, if I remember correctly, all but disappeared. Like, they basically just disappeared until, like, the final episode of the season. But I felt like that was going to be an important part of it. I thought that was going to be an important showcase of Kamala's personality. And I'm trying to think. I believe at some point I was also thinking that they were going to, I think it was because of her personality perhaps, I was thinking they might go into Kamala being neurodivergent. And I was like, great, more representation. They did not. But I feel like, if she had, for example, ADHD or something like that, it would have been really good because they could talk about neurodivergence and then include the pop art in that. That might be how she sees the world, how she thinks, how she copes with the, with the struggles of ADHD and things like that. It could be a manifestation of it, all of that. So, I was kind of upset that the pop art elements that I really liked in the first episode for their uniqueness, for their quirkiness, just kind of, disappeared for a while. I'm actually just skimming through my notes right now because that is how I will have the most coherent thoughts on the show. Let's see. There's me talking about the pop art bits. Let's see. Oh, I said I think the organization of the show could have been better. So there's a bit where there's Jin involved and they return to their realm, ? They died, ? It was actually really confusing because at the end of episode 5, they had been set up as the sympathetic mentors quickly turned villains / people who need to be stopped, and then they're gone at the end of episode 5. And, they were setting it up like they were going to be the main antagonist at the end, but then all of a sudden, the antagonistic force is the damage control unit, which we know comparatively little about, and I was really hoping we'd get some more information on them, but they just kind of remained like a dark horse the whole time. So, yeah, I would have liked more detail on their interest in superpowered beings who, haven't outright done anything totally unforgivable. Like, if we could get more of their personal and organizational motivations, that would have been great. If we had known more about their leader and why their leader created the damage control unit, I think we would have viewed them as more of a threat because we understood them more. Like, we understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they want what they want, and that makes them more serious, at least in my opinion. Yes, there's something to be said for antagonists that you know comparatively little about, it's just, I think that they would have been more compelling as antagonists if we had known their motivations, why they were doing what they were doing. Like, if somebody's relative in the damage control unit had been inadvertently killed by somebody with superpowers or something like that, then it would make sense. But, oh well. Let's see. Anyway, yeah, that's most of my thoughts on the Marvels. And then let me look at, then we have She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I didn't like that show. I know there are some people who really did, but I didn't like it. I honestly blocked a whole lot of this show out of my brain because I did not enjoy it. So, in order to best explain my thoughts on it, I think I might just read my notes verbatim as long as they make sense. So, I'm just gonna read my notes. Marvel's newest show, not my favorite. I wanted to like it, as with any Marvel show that I watch, but it's just not for me. Whenever something doesn't work for me and the reason isn't obvious, I try to dig a little bit and figure out why I don't like it. Hence, basically, this entire podcast episode. For She-Hulk, the first thing I thought was that I'm not the target audience. It seems to be directed rather specifically towards millennial women in their 30s who can relate to Jen Walters, the main character's struggles. I can understand and empathize with her struggles, but I can't quite figure out why I'm not just loving the show then, because it's clearly meant to be relatable. Is it that they're trying too hard to be relatable and about female empowerment? Maybe it's because it's too on the nose that I don't like it. But then again, the whole theme of the show seems to be on the nose with all of the fourth wall breaking. There doesn't seem to be much, if any, mystery to the fourth wall breaking gimmick, the way there was for the sitcom style gimmick of WandaVision. Like, there was a whole purpose. What I mean by that is there's a whole purpose with the sitcoms in WandaVision. They were meant to do something, but I didn't understand why we had this fourth wall breaking thing in She-Hulk. Maybe it's a quirk of the comics that I'm just not familiar with, but I don't know. I was confused. So, in the first episode of She-Hulk, Jen stares at the camera confused for a moment and then just brushes it off, and I'm like, what in the world does that mean? Does she realize that she's being watched and just kind of go, whatever, I guess my life is being filmed? Or, what was that? So yeah, it didn't feel important or necessary to the plot, and I was honestly just confused and didn't really get it. So then another thought that I had is perhaps I've misunderstood the show, because, like I said, I really want to understand why I don't like something when I don't like it. I want to understand what's not working for me, and if I understand what's not working for me, it could be that I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I don't like the show, or it could help me find a new way to enjoy the show, which is why I do this whole thing anyway. So, another thought I had is that I've possibly misunderstood the show. Maybe the reason why I don't totally love it is because it feels very episodic. The tie-ins between episodes are minimal, and aside from episode 6, holy crap, I made it to episode 6? Wow! I actually watched all the way to episode 6. I can't believe I actually managed to get that far through the show. I thought I stopped after, episode 3. So aside from episode 6, where there is a reminder that there's still people out there who are after Jen's blood, there, really isn't much of a plot. Each episode is relatively self-contained, and, okay, here's something. There's a show that I love dearly. It's called Psych. It ran on the USA Network from 2006 to 2014. Incredible show, would highly recommend if you have not seen it. But anyway, Psych is largely the same way in that there are references to other storylines, but it is largely episodic. There isn't usually, one specific arc or one specific goal. There are through lines in the episodes, but each episode is relatively self-contained except for, season finales and the lead-ups and, that sort of thing. So, there's also some indirect fourth wall breaking in Psych, and I guess I prefer indirect fourth wall breaking with, self and other aware characters like they have in Psych. I just don't like the, mysteriously staring into the camera and then pretending like nothing happened. Like, that was just jarring. Anyway, why then do I love Psych but not She-Hulk? Because I'm drawing these parallels between them, and I'm like, I adore the show and, low-key detest the other one. So let's figure it out. I think it might be a difference in sense of humor. Sykes' humor is sometimes just goofy, but there's also some good intelligent humor too. She-Hulk's attempt at humor is focused mainly on the relatability of situations, at least as far as I can tell, and I can understand how these situations could be relatable for a lot of women, and there are some things I can relate to, you know, like the desire to seem insanely successful and awesome when you re-encounter old acquaintances, or the fear of being attacked while walking alone at night. Funny enough, my opinions have actually changed somewhat towards this. Like, I still fear being attacked while walking alone at night. But I don't necessarily need to seem insanely successful and awesome to old acquaintances, because why should I care what they think? That's something that's changed for me, but I understand it still. And, there are some things that I can relate to in the show, while others I can't, and actually, I feel like most of them I can't. And I don't know if it's because I can't relate so much to some of the other aspects of the show, but I just don't find what I believe is the intended humor to be as humorous. So, next bullet point. I kid you not, I'm just reading through bullet points in my notes because I don't remember it. I think in a way, part of my issue with the show is how episodic it is. Episodic shows are not bad, e.g., Psych, but all the other Marvel projects had one unifying storyline. They were largely plot-driven, also not necessarily a strictly good or bad thing, and there's a cliffhanger ending to each episode and it made you want to keep watching. There aren't really true cliffhangers in She-Hulk because of the episodic nature, which might be a slight detractor for me, but not necessarily. But then the plot for me was lacking. I was like, where is the show going? The show didn't have a clear direction. Here's another thing. I think another issue I have with the show is the lack of character development. I know who Jen is as a character, there's no question about that. That's pretty clear. However, she hasn't evolved or learned or grown much, if at all, in the show, and I'm a sucker for good character development. When there's not, I'm like, what is the point? People are supposed to grow and evolve. People, by nature, are not static. We grow and we evolve and we change, regardless of whether or not we want to, and in various ways. But anyway, a few more points on this, and then I think that will just about conclude my rant. Another thing I realize is that She-Hulk feels different from previous Marvel projects because the formula is different. The main character gets powers, and instead of struggling with them, she figures them out really quickly and has a vastly different experience from other protagonists. I respect the departure from formula because, it gets boring when you just use the same old formula over and over, but she needs to struggle with something and grow in the process. And as of yet, it doesn't seem like she has one particular struggle that defines her character arc in the show, and I think that might be one of the main problems. There's clearly a desire to be as relatable as possible to viewers with their references, humor, and depiction of daily struggles that a lot of women face. That's all well and good, and all of those things can still be a part of the show, but there needs to be a central struggle. There needs to be a central through line, a central purpose, a central point, a place that we are going. You could argue that the central struggle of She-Hulk is just trying to function as a woman in society, but that completely ignores the superhero aspect of the genre, which is kind of an important part of telling a superhero story, And I get that Jen doesn't want to be a superhero, but they keep showcasing her powers and then doing very little with them. All she does is use her powers to get attention and occasionally fight Titania. Oh, that was the character's name. Titania, when she shows up. I feel like the whole She-Hulk thing has become a gimmick rather than a power, blessing, curse, etc. I would also argue that just using her powers to get attention is actually somewhat demeaning. It's kind of, albeit unintentionally, putting out the message that looks are all that matters, because Jen's focus is on trying to find a stable relationship, at least that's an important part of the show. She wants to be viewed as successful and beautiful and attractive and find a man and things like that. But her focus on just being She-Hulk and getting admiration for that kind of unintentionally undermines her intelligence and makes it seem like beauty is the only thing that matters. So while this helps bring up the topic of how unfortunately shallow people can be, it also inadvertently suggests that the only way you can get people to like you is by being pretty. Forget the fact that Jen is a smart and successful lawyer. As soon as she becomes She-Hulk, everybody loves her and things go her way. And I feel like that really actually completely undermines their message of empowerment. Like, Jen is giving into societal standards and being like, oh, well, if I'm, sexy and fabulous, everybody's going to love me, so let's just do that. Instead of, fighting back and being like, no, 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 I'm intelligent, and I will find a man who appreciates me because I'm intelligent. Sure, I can turn into this beautiful, powerful woman, like, with my powers, but I'm also just an intelligent, kind person, and I can find somebody who appreciates me for me, not for who I look like or pretend to be. So, anyway. I think that an interesting alternate struggle that would have made the show a lot more compelling would be for Jen to love being She-Hulk as a party trick, but she slowly realizes that her persona is addictive like a drug, and she struggles to enjoy being just Jen, just herself. Then the story could focus on self-love and self-acceptance and reconciling her two identities, while also having a stronger superhero-ish plot. There could also be a discussion of beauty standards and how unfair it is that you usually either get shoved into the smart or pretty, but not both boxes. And I think that would have actually made the show a lot stronger. And like I said, I didn't finish watching the show because I just lost respect and interest for it, because I felt like they were trying to do female empowerment, but they were doing it wrong, which is really sad because I'm pretty sure the show was written and directed by women. And, internalized misogyny is a thing, but, like, I was really hoping that that would help make it better. Maybe it's just that I'm not the target audience. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe I missed something because I didn't watch the last 3 episodes of the show. But it's like, they completely undermined the female empowerment bit by being like, ah, yes, people will like me if I'm my beautiful, powerful alter ego. Nobody will like me for just me. Like, am I the only one realizing this? But anyway, I think that actually brings us finally to the end of this very chaotic, all over the place rant about the MCU. As far as where it's going, you know what? That's something I wanted to address that I think I said I would at the beginning. I would say that the main shortcomings of the MCU currently are the fact that they are emphasizing quantity over quality. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's the show that recently came out, Secret Invasion. I haven't watched any of it because I looked at the synopsis and went, no, doesn't seem like it's for me. And I haven't heard exactly glowing things about it either. And to be honest, it's really sad to say, but I've kind of stopped caring about the MCU. I wanted to keep loving it past Endgame, but Endgame tied things up really nicely. And I don't think that they're going to be able to top that. I don't think that the same quality of storytelling is there. I don't think the same quality of writing is there. I think that people are trying to go in a lot of directions with it. Opening up the multiverse completely opened a can of worms, and I think that might be part of why things are getting so ridiculous and messed up at this point in the MCU. But I think that there's an issue with writing. There's a lack of consistency both in the MCU overall across storylines and for characters. I'm thinking of Wanda especially, with, WandaVision versus the crazed villainess she was in Multiverse of Madness. So I think there's just a lot of inconsistency, and I think what needs to happen is everybody who's going to be part of Marvel as a director, creator, etc., I feel like there needs to be a giant memo sent out, or at the very least, or a giant meeting with everybody to be like, okay, this is the direction we are going in. These are the things that need to happen. Yes, you have free reign to play and be creative, but respect the people and works that came before you. Respect the source material, if you will, respect what came before, and don't just, turn it into this crazy, ridiculous thing. Because I think what it is there's too many different creative minds who are involved. Not that more creative minds is bad, but not everybody's on the same page with what's going on in the MCU, and they're not necessarily respecting, what all is going on in the MCU. I feel like there's a lack of respect for that, and that is probably my main frustration. So, lack of respect for the sources and the material that came before, and just kind of scrapping that and going, well, no, I'm gonna do my own thing. instead of, like, you can go in a new direction with characters. That is important for keeping things fresh, but it has to come from somewhere. It can't just be like, oh, guess they're evil now. Like, just, I'm not going to buy that. I feel like most people aren't going to buy that. Even people who just kind of watch movies mindlessly, I feel like people kind of have to realize that this change of character just sort of came out of nowhere and was unjustified. So, issues with creative people not being on the same page, issues with quality of writing, and I would also say it's unclear where the MCU is going at this point. I think that to improve it, they need to get all of the creators on the same page about respecting source material. I think that, writers, because, okay, here's another thing. The writing might not actually be the problem. It might just be, the producer's fault or something, or there could have been some really great things that the writers wrote for the show that ended up, getting cut, and so the show wasn't what it was intended to be. There's a lot of things. So the writing that ends up getting used in the show needs to be of better quality. They need to work on pacing. So I would say consistency, writing, pacing. I feel like they've also kind of lost the spirit of Marvel somewhere in there. I need to rediscover what that means for them and what they want for the franchise overall. And they also need to just slow the heck down. Take things slower. I mean, think about it. Endgame took, 9-10 years to build up to? Almost 10 whole years to build up to. And yet, was it even 11 years? Maybe I'm getting my years wrong. I think it was 10, almost 11 years of MCU to get to that point. And yes, they produced a lot of work during that time. But if you look at the sheer volume of projects that have been released in the past couple of months, years, whatever, it's like, whoa, slow down. And I think they're realizing, too, that they need to pull back. But I think they need to reevaluate. I think they need to step back from creating for a little while and figure out, creative consistency, even if you have a lot of creative minds at the table. Like, yes, invite all the creative minds, but make sure that there's a rule for consistency. Make sure that the writing that ends up in the shows is actually good. Know where the MCU is headed. And focus instead on storytelling and quality and what you truly, meaningfully want to convey in your work, rather than just cranking out a meh show or movie or whatever, just to, fill the space. It's sort of like, it's better to sit in silence than just start spewing nonsense, in my opinion. It's better to save your voice for important things. I say this as I'm making an over 2-hour long podcast, but it's better to save your voice for the important things than waste it just spewing nonsense, spewing unhelpful things, things that don't matter. Save your voice for what matters. Save your creativity for what matters. Save your storytelling for the stories that you really want to tell. Focus not on, just cranking out more things for your audience. Stop focusing on the money aspect of it and focus instead on the heart of Marvel. Focus instead on the heart of storytelling. Focus instead on the heart of what you really want for these characters, for the MCU. Step away from the money aspect of it and think more about the storytelling that you're doing, I guess. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this stupidly long podcast episode. The other ones probably won't be over 2 hours like this one is. I just had a lot of material to cover in this one, hence the 2-hour podcast. I'm also planning to do some Star Wars ones. I will not try to cover all of Star Wars in one podcast, because that would be like a 24-hour podcast probably, but I'll break it up into sections and talk about Star Wars. I'm also planning on talking about various books, and you know what? I will talk to you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed this, and sending you all the love.